Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This is Dr. Tanveer Ahmed. I am lecturer in Institute of Business Studies, Guwahati Institute of Science and Technology. And the subject that I am going to teach is financial risk management. The topic that we are going to cover is mechanics of future markets. Let's move to the contents. We are going to understand what is derivatives. How do we define derivatives? What are its types? And the difference between derivatives and insurance. So starting with our definition of derivatives, a derivative can be defined as a financial instrument whose value depends on another underlying asset. So when we say financial instrument, when we use the term financial instrument, what do we mean by it? Financial instrument is nothing but an agreement between two parties. For example, let's take an example of bond. Bond is a financial instrument, and we are calling it an agreement between bond holder and bond seller. So the bond seller have made an agreement to pay a fixed amount of interest for a specific time period and the payment of principal amount on maturity, whereas the bond holder have agreed on paying the principal amount for a specific time period. So it's an agreement. Let's discuss shares, stocks. They are also an agreement. The companies selling the shares have made an agreement that they would pay a specific dividend if the board approves so. And the shareholder, the buyer of the share, have made an agreement, have agreed to give the money to the company so that they can invest in assets in their business activities. So similarly, like bonds and shares, derivatives are also financial instruments. But the difference between this financial instrument is that its value is derived through some underlying asset, and we will discuss an example in a while. We would then understand what do we mean by an underlying asset. So why derivatives are used? They are used to reduce the risk exposure of a firm, or we can say that they are used as an hedging technique. And what is hedging? Hedging is basically a strategy, a technique that uses derivative instruments to reduce the risk of a firm. Let's discuss an example. PIA makes an agreement with PSO, which is Pakistan State Oil, to buy fuel, jet fuel, after 1 month at rupees 90 per liter. So PIA and PSO have agreed that no matter what the price is after 1 month in the market, PIA would buy from PSO at 90 rupees per liter. So they both would have to fulfill the agreement. So I may ask, the value of this agreement depends on what? The agreement between the PIA and PSO. The value of this agreement depends on the value of or the price of the fuel. So the fuel is basically the underlying asset, right? And the value of this agreement, remember, it is a derivative. So the value of this derivative depends on the fuel. If the price of the fuel increases, its value would increase or decrease, and we would discuss what would happen. But the point to understand at this stage is that by underlying asset, what do we mean by it, and what do we mean by derivatives? So this is an agreement, and its value is derived from an underlying. Let's move forward. So there are different markets. There are derivative market for credit derivative market. There are energy derivatives market. There is weather derivative market. So there are a lot of derivative markets around. But we want to discuss what is the difference between derivatives and insurance. Remember, we said in the earlier slide that derivatives are used to minimize the risk of a firm. So is insurance used for the same matter. So why, what is the difference between derivative and insurance? Now, insurance is basically used for a high risk but low probability events. Say, for example, flood, earthquake, say fire in a factory. See, so these are events that have a low probability. The chance of occurrence of these event is low. They would occur, they wouldn't occur frequently. But when they would occur, the loss to the firm would be quite high enough, right? So insurance is used when the risk is high, but the chance of occurrence of the event is low. On the other hand, the derivative is used for exactly opposite situation. Derivative is used for the events where the probability of occurrence is high, but the loss from those event would be low. In the earlier slide, we discussed the example of change in the price of a fuel product. So the price of fuel changes quite frequently. It increases and decreases on daily basis, right? But so the probability of occurrence of that event is quite high. But when that event would occur, it's in normal situation its risk would be low, right? So the change in price would be, say, dollar per barrel or so per day, right? Kind of situation, except for situations where there would be a systematic risk and there would be disaster. Other than that, it would be a minor change in the price of. So moving on, what are different types of derivatives? For now, we would discuss three types of derivatives. First one is the future contract. Remember, contract, it is an agreement or contract. We are using the same terminology. So contracts or agreement, they both are same in case of this lecture. They are synonymously used. We have forward contract, we have future contract, and then we have options. Options are further divided into subtypes, say put option and call option, and then we have American option and European option. And that is the matter that we would discuss in future slides. But let's discuss the first type of contract, first type of derivatives, which is forward contract. So what is forward contract? It is an agreement to buy or sell an asset at a certain future time for a specific price. So the terms that you need to remember is a specific price, price is fixed, time is fixed, the asset is fixed, and we are either buying or selling the asset, and that is an agreement. So when this would happen, then we would call it a forward contract. The same example, the example of PIA and PSO, so they both agreed to buy or sell. PIA agreed to buy, PSO agreed to sell an asset which was predefined, fuel. The time was predefined after 1 month, and the price was predefined. So in this example, this is a perfect example of a forward contract. There are few terminologies that we need to discuss that are related to forward contract. Spot price, forward price, future spot price, and expiration date. So let's start with the spot price. What is spot price? It is the price of the asset or the underlying asset. Remember, when we say asset, we meant to say the underlying asset. It is the price of the asset in the market at the time of entering into the contract. So PIA is entering into the contract on 1st of May. So this spot price is the price of fuel in market, in open market on 1st of May. Remember, 1st of May is the time when both parties are entering into the contract. So let's say on 1st of May the price in market is 95 rupees per liter. So this would be spot price. Next, forward price. Forward price is the price that is mentioned on the contract or on the forward contract, or the price on which the both parties have agreed. So in this example, rupees 90 per liter is forward price. Both the parties have agreed to buy or sell the underlying asset at this specific price. So this is forward price, the price both parties have agreed on. Future spot price, the price of the asset at the time of maturity of the contract. So when is this contract going to mature? It is going to mature on 31st of May 2020. So let's say the price in the market on this date, on the maturity, is say 110 rupees per liter. Then that price would be called future spot price. Right? And expiration date. What is expiration date? Expiration date is the time of maturity. Remember, that is the easy one, the 31st of May 2020 in our example. Let's move forward. So a forward contract is traded in over the counter market. For now, just understand this, that over the counter market is an informal market, and in couple of slides we would discuss this concepts in detail. So there are two more terminologies that we need to remember. One is called long position and the other is called short position. Long position, the party that is buying the asset is called to have a long position. So in our previous example, who was buying the asset? PIA, right? So PIA is having a long position, and the party that is selling the asset is said to have a short position. So in the previous example, PSO was selling the asset. So PSO would have what position? Short position. Remember, this terminology would be easy to understand if you relate this S with the words sell. Remember, sell starts with an S and the short position starts with an S. So shorts is for sell. It makes it easy to remember these terminologies. So let's move forward and discuss a practical example. So say there, as you know, next Football World Cup will be played in Russia. This is an old example, so let's go with it. Like Brazil did, Russia will need to construct football stadiums, sitting arrangement, parking areas, etc., which need heavy consumption of cement. Russia does not have the required amount of cement. It will call many producers of cement to send their quotations to Russia. If from Pakistan best dressed cement is shortlisted and approved for export of cement to Russia at $10 a bag, 5 lakh bags by December 2020, ignore this 2017, it will be an example of forward contract. Why is it an example of forward contract? Because there is an asset that is being bought or sold, cement is being bought or sold at a predetermined price on a future date, December 2020. So it is a perfect example of a forward contract. Which party would have a long position? Remember, long position is the position of the party who is buying the asset. So in this example, Russia is buying the asset. So they would have a long position, and Best Cement is selling the asset. They would have a short position.